Alright, so I need to take a moment here and do a little math refresher. I know it's been a while since you've seen some of this, but we're going to use this quite a bit in dynamics. So as a refresher, let's take a moment and talk about the chain rule. Actually, I'll say chain and the product rule. And the chain and product rule used with differentiation. So let's say that we were given a function of y, I should say y is a function of x, and we're also given x as a function of time. Well, what we want is y dot. What is y dot? It's the derivative of y with respect to time, but y is not as a function of time. So what the chain rule tells us, y dot once again is dy dt. In order to get there, what I can say is I can take the derivative of y with respect to x and then multiply that times the derivative of x with respect to t. So that is your chain rule. So let's look at an example. Let's say, for example, if I had y is equal to x cubed and we had x is equal to t to the fourth, and I wanted to find my y dot, like I said, that's equal to dy dx times dx dt. So what if I look at my dy dx, that's just 3x squared. And when you get to the dx dt, you're not actually taking the derivative of this t to the fourth. Instead, what you're leaving is an x dot, because I know by definition dx dt is x dot. And then the reason I'm doing that is when we start working these dynamics problems, what we really want is, in this case, it would be our velocity in the x direction as a function of our velocity in the y direction. Are the two related to each other? We can do the same thing with the acceleration, our y double dot. And our y double dot would be the derivative with respect to time of this 3x squared times x dot. So if I'm losing you, what I'm looking at is I'm taking the derivative of this 3x squared x dot. How do I do that? Well, I take the derivative of the first times the second. So that's what I just did. Derivative of 3x squared times the second. I'm writing the whole thing out. Normally I wouldn't do this, but we're going slow with this refresher. Plus the first, which is 3x squared, times the derivative of the second. So that'd be the derivative with respect to time of x dot. And this whole idea of breaking it apart like this in these two different parts is called our product rule. And going through and actually doing the math, then if I take the derivative of 3x squared, remember x is a function of y, not a function of t. So the derivative of 3x squared is 6x. However, after I get that 6x, I end up with the fact that I have to add in this x dot because x was not as a function of y. Now I have this, that was all from this first part. Now I have this additional x dot. So x dot times x dot gives me an x dot squared. Looking at the second half with this 3x squared times the derivative with respect to t of x dot, well, I already know that's just taking another derivative and it's adding a dot above my x dot, giving me an x double dot. So I can factor out a 3x, and it would be 3x times, let's see, 2x dot squared plus x double dot. Something like that. So that's kind of how you would use the chain and product rule.